Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode of Fight Chat Friday from TKD Coach Academy. We're continuing this week in our series looking back at the AETF European Championships, and this time we're following the minus 70 kilo male division where Magomed Naurdinov from Norway went the whole way to the final. So if you'd like to see how his journey went and what lessons we can learn from that, stick with us today.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Fight Chat Friday. We're coming close to the end of the year, so we'll see how these episodes are going. So far they've been really good and people have been enjoying them, so get in the comments again and let us know how you're enjoying these series, if you want us to continue, who we will look at next and things like that. So as Adrian said, we're going to look at the 78 division today from the Euros and look at Magamet from Norway. So he came through a couple of rounds in this one, and he did really, really well. Up a division, of course, from the minus 70 world title he won.
I think I introduced that at minus 70, and there we go. But I'm used to seeing Mago at minus 70, so this is a nice change.
Yeah, so nice to get the win in minus 70, jump up the weight divisions, and take the Euros as well.
Yeah.
So technically, he's world and European champion present, because we haven't had a Worlds yet since COVID. So. Nice little way to cap off the year, especially after the kind of the I suppose, what is it now? Is it almost a year and a half since there was major championships?
Oh yeah, definitely. So from what I suppose until 2019 to that Euros there last month. So yeah, it's quite a stretch.
Yeah, so I think we'll have a look at some things there that Magamet is really good at, and I think there's some very important takeaways from his game, but in the broader sense of like the mental strength he has and the good decision making and things like that. He uses the basics really, really well, and I think that the decision making that he makes in important moments are crucial to him getting the win.
Yeah, definitely. You often see it from restarts and moments where he's just taking a look at the board, the scoreboard, and taking in the game state, and he makes those very quick adjustments to what he's doing, deciding whether he can take more risks or he needs to go back to his plan A. And I think he does that very, very well consistently throughout the whole competition.
Yeah, and I spoke to Magamet as well after the Euros, and now Grandmaster, shout out to Grandmaster Willie van der Martel.
Yeah. His
plan for Magamet was to not concede minus points and to actually use his psychic. So anyone who knows Mago, he's a fan of a bit of a scrap, so he likes to get stuck in. So the plan was to maybe keep it clean and to use the psychics that he can use really well and pick up nice points from that. And we see some times where maybe he gets a little bit excited and likes to get into the thick of the fight and gets reined back in by Master van der Martel again to get back on the train and get to work with those psychics. So I'm sure we'll address that as well.
Yeah, this one's a little bit of a longer one, I suppose, because he had 5 rounds. And so maybe let's jump in right away and have a look at his first round opening match, which was against Belgium. And, we can kind of see already some of the, like in this match, some of those basic principles coming to play. Especially just here off that one, like that very effective side kick.
Yeah, and he kind of sits back behind it as well, which is nice, because usually you expect people to be super tall on that and to carry it, but Magamet actually leans back on it and he's still able to kind of push forward with it and get some. It really is a threat, and he's always threatening to the hip with it, and the way he kind of sneaks it in is very, very effective. Reminds me a little bit of Dylan Fitzgibbon in a way with that, the way he just kind of like sneaks it in. So a very effective psychic that he has.
Yeah, I think there's that, as I said, those couple of elements of where he carries his body, but also how far back he retracts the knee varies a little bit, and how direct he is with it, whether he carries in doubles and singles. So he does vary the length of the side kick very well, but also I think within the kick, the length of his chamber changes quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely. A nice hook kick here actually from Belgium was a nice shot. But you see that he's really good at controlling the space, and you can see the scoreboard here is not live, but it's very evident that Magamet is just kind of using this first round to kind of get firing and almost using his experience really well. That's something that I noticed, that he's now really, really experienced, and he's able to use the ring to his advantage and the warnings to his advantage much more than he was when he started off competing internationally.
particularly in those initial stages, just to get to that 4-0, you know, or the 3-0, you know, to get the flags in his favour, like get that third warning against his opponent, keep everything fairly low key. But you know, again, there's that thing of, well, if you do take the foot off the gas, if you do lose your concentration with Mago, he can explode.
Yeah, he's always a threat, and he can just launch. So it's something you don't expect, because he's very chilled in there, and he's very relaxed, and sometimes he's almost low tempo. But that's why it's effective, because he can catch you. I think it's very important as well to notice that he always gets on top with his side kick, and we see that a couple of times in this match and throughout the whole thing. And this is a great example of it. He always gets his leg on top with the side kick, and that's so important. And once his leg is up on top, it's hard to counter him or get anything off.
Absolutely. But that little clip there is maybe the first of many that we're going to see, where he picks a beautiful angle against these right-legged fighters to get outside of their front leg and take advantage of the position to get to hands. Yeah,
so nice first win. Get you going on the board. You'll see these experienced guys, they don't want to really waste a lot of energy in their first round, because they know that they're going to go through potentially 5 rounds of this, and they don't want to exert too much energy and have a barn burner in the first match. So that just shows the experience that he's picked up over the last couple of years, because usually he was a quick starter, comes out the blocks flying, and he would have maybe exuberated a bit more energy than he did in this one. So the experience is very important.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things where being able to relax a little bit into it and use the match, you know, I suppose you don't know that necessarily when you're starting the match, that you're going to be able to take the foot off a little bit. But when you kind of judge the game state, you know how it feels, you're in control on the board. You know, that is a decision that sometimes you can take, and when it's available to you, particularly in the early rounds of a longer competition, it's well worth it. So he jumped straight away then into quite a challenging series of matches, but this second round was quite a tough one, I think, for him.
Yeah, I love this match. This was a great one. So Alessandro here from Italy, who's actually training partner with Timmy Boss, and you can actually see a lot of his kind of style rub off as well. But again, Magamet starts well, and I think there's a big battle here for ring position, and we'll see it more as the match goes on. But Magamet actually got caught in the very first exchange with his side kick, and then he kind of tries to suck in Alessandro to score a headshot, I feel, which is just prior to this clip. So he was trying to like shorten up, and like you said earlier, even change the distance of the chamber to almost suck him in to almost score a head kick if he was going to come counter that side kick again. So it was clever, but just the Italian was just too clever. He didn't bite on it.
And I think just when you look at that, there's that little bit of a height and reach difference between the Italian and Mago there, where I think Magamet has kind of gone with, oh, okay, maybe I can't as easily be on top of the front leg each time. I need to make, again, good use of this this angle and find some lines to get to hands. But just there, you know, great example of picking the a way through with the side kick direct or with the double shifts, you know, really effective.
Yeah, but I think what's very important here is because Magamet is known for having strong hands, and he almost threatens that just for that kind of almost that bolt, as if he's going to launch into a blitz, and that gets people ready, and then he can set up the side kick really well. So he uses like a fake of body kind of movement to set that up as if he's going to launch, and he picks off the side kick well off it. So it's a nice little move. Yeah,
and almost like the pendulum motion with the upper body, so he's kind of leaning forward, showing hands, and then as the legs come forward, the body leans back to make space for it. But Alessandro here making kind of good use of the basic principles, kind of, you know, keeping Mago under pressure to where he can't work, pushing him out, building up the warnings. So it's kind of, well, if I'm not getting the return off the referees on the corners, maybe I can get the return, you know, the guaranteed way by having the opponent out of the ring or on his backside, and get my score that way.
Yeah, and he starts the second round. This is the second round here, and he starts the exact same, putting the pressure on, trying to squeeze the space. So this is what I was talking about earlier. And Magamet realizes this now, and he kind of comes back to hold the center again. Maybe he's very aware of the game state on the scoreboard, of the warnings, etc. So he's aware of that. I also want to have a look at this one again, because I don't know, did Magamet intentionally drop here? If it is, it's incredible self-awareness to know that it's better to give up the warning and keep another extra mat of space than to actually go for an exit. So it's almost like he falls on purpose. I don't know, maybe he did, maybe he didn't.
I actually think Alessandro catches his heel just a little.
Okay, right.
So if you just watch Alessandro's right hand, I think I've jumped back to the right place. Yeah, so just here. So if you just watch Alessandro's right hand, I think it just clips Mago's heel and his foot ends up falling forward. And after that, there's that, that little bit of here, it just kind of catches it on the way down. I think he kind of goes, right, I'm not in a good way, and drops. But yeah, as you said, whether it's very quick thinking or just that was the natural reaction to his heel being clipped, I don't know.
And there's that great angle that you mentioned again earlier. When you have that left versus right battle, if you can get your front foot to the outside, it's so valuable, because if you don't, you're gonna get trapped in side facing position. So Magamet always gets that lead leg to the outside.
And I think it's interesting that in watching the 5 fights, didn't see his opponent seek out that position. And I think because of that, there wasn't really a battle for that outside position. Magamet just took it most of the time.
Yeah. And like Alessandro's doing the right thing. He's trying to squeeze the space and put the pressure, but he's not really getting the return. So it's like, what do you do here? Do you stick to your guns and do the right thing? Or do you try adapt to the referees and what they're scoring? Like, what do you think on that one, Adrian?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be very hard to adapt in the moment. If you know before you've gone into the match from previous fights, or if you know from the first round and you're adapting the second round, fine. But I don't know what his go-to would have been. But what I do like from this sequence is, like, Magamet's gone back to that well 4 or 5 times and stepping onto the outside and getting to hands. And I think that's a big turning point in this one, momentum-wise, because there's no coming back momentum, I think, for Alessandro. Like, the extra warnings and the rest of it aren't going to do it now. Lovely back kick. Did we get that? No. So we'll go back to the back kick. But what I think is, like, in those couple of seconds, and it's literally 8 or 10 seconds. We'll have a look at the back kick first. But in those 8 or 10 seconds, Alessandro's gone and made the same initial opening, and Mago's been able to do the exact same in terms of bringing the hand into play. And there's probably been 2 or 3 direct scores there in that kind of like rush of blood to the head, where a moment's thought of that didn't work out for me, I need to change what I'm doing, would probably have been a very, very good call for Alessandro there. Because like if Magamet can go and like deal with front leg side kick by stepping outside left backhand, but he can do it from the 4 openings in a row, definitely Alessandro had to change something. Like that's, and I think all that's happened there is you've got caught up in the game state. He knows he has to go to work. His go-to is, I'm going to pick up this front leg and carry and put Magamet under pressure. And we saw that being so effective at the end of round 1 and the start of round 2. But Magamet's just gone, okay, I'll step outside. And he's shortened the distance, changed the angle, gone to hands. And I just think that momentum in the like start of the last 30 seconds or whatever it was, that was a big changing point.
2 things for me that are very important in this match is, one, at the end he's completely aware of where he is, Magamet. He knows the time that's left, he knows the warnings and the flags that are available to Alessandro, and he knows the score, and that allows him to kind of hang around on the edge there for the end. And he's able, like, he's comfortable there. It's very, very, very obvious that he's comfortable and he's able to pick off the shots. But I think this all comes from getting ahead early with multiple referees, because Alessandro's doing the right thing, squeezing the space. But by squeezing the space, he's pushing to the corners where not that many referees can see him score. Where Magamet's side kicks are very long distance, and he's able to pick them off where it's very visible and very easy for the referees, most of the 4 referees, to score the side kick.
Actually, yeah, there's a kind of a catch-22 in there for Alessandro, because as he's pushing Magamet back out into the corners, Magamet's going to different corners. So particularly he used, from our perspective, the front left and the back right. So in using those 2 corners, and going out in those two sides, he's kind of showing 2 referees a side kick on one and 2 referees a side kick or a back kick on the other. So he's kind of getting a little score on both cards. And unfortunately, with the way it is, he's making the shots on exits, or he's holding his ground and then exiting. So often Alessandro's only getting really the return in terms of the warnings. He's not necessarily getting the scores as well. So he has to either be over Magamet's front leg to be able to get to that hands. Maybe he has to start directly to hands and not get caught with the side kick on the way in. But once Magamet's got ahead, it's become difficult there. and there was clearly just from Magomed's actions, there weren't enough warnings on the board to threaten his score, because otherwise he doesn't behave like that. He doesn't back up to the edge of the ring and risk those exits if the warnings are critical.
Yeah, so the takeaway there is to travel around to each corner and show the referees your scores.
Yeah.
But no, really, I think that the very important takeaways here is the importance of knowing the game state, but also being in the moment of the match. So you see a lot of people get caught up with the board too much, but then not being aware of the present moment that's coming in what's important next. And then as well, I think it's very important to practice and be comfortable in common situations that are going to occur, because when we train for ITF, usually we get an open space and we just spar. But if you really do need to practice the match setting in a ring where the clock is counting down, maybe you're ahead, maybe you're behind, maybe you're in the corner, the restarts, which is something that we've seen Magomed do really well. So he might exit, then he comes in a meter, the referee will restart the match, and he is ready. He almost knows what he's going to do straight away, and most of the time he's actually going to take space back and get back into the center, usually with a score. So I think it's very important as a takeaway for anybody who's watching to maybe be aware that these situations that are very common in the sport side of ITF Taekwondo need to be practiced.
Yeah, and definitely even that little sequence where there's the 3 or 4 or even 5 repetitions of the same opening. Like there's a little bit of a message in that where Magamet is asking the same, or is presenting the same problem to his opponent again and again and again until his opponent finds a solution. Well, that question is enough. So sometimes it's a case of you ask questions of your opponent, and if they can't answer the question, if they can't solve the problem, well, then you don't need to ask a new question. You just keep asking the question until until they solve it, or they change the environment. You go back to the well, and I think being confident to do that, is also a sign of a competitor who's thinking their way through the fight, rather than a sign of someone who's just going on plan A. I don't think that's what it is. So we move up into our quarterfinal, and again another really good match with JUKKA HOLMÉN from Finland.
Yeah, definitely. This one starts off again. I guess these guys probably are aware of each other. They're around a long time, and guessing they're from the Scandinavian countries.
Yeah,
they might come
almost
across
neighbours
each other as well. Yeah, almost neighbours. So it's a great match. Starts off front leg battle again, just like most fights, really, isn't it?
Well, definitely, but there's a big contrast, I think, in terms of how both of them take their front leg into play, and how they want to get to hands, and I think that becomes the story of this match, really. So really nice work from JUKKA there in terms of connecting them.
Yeah, I think that he actually does well to bring the few flags back again, but I think that's a good point that you make. It's like he's mixing up the threat of the long side kick, where Magamet is trying to keep his a bit tighter, and where JUKKA is trying to get distance on it, and then it allows him to actually mix in the hands. You got to be brave there as well to go through with the hands to there, but he's getting the reward on the judges' scorecards.
Definitely, but I think as I said, he's taking that slightly higher, chamber a lot of the time, or with the knee a little further back. More of the what would you call it, the hybrid or utility chamber, where it's not always the best chamber for purely the side kick, but it's giving him the option then to change it, to go hook kick, to go to the head with the turning kick, and in doing that, it's just presenting some different challenges for Magamet. He can't make as clear a decision about how he wants to deal with it, because it's presenting the same way for two different threats.
Yeah, and just this last clip here as well, I think it's important to give Rory credit, the referee, because we've mentioned referees not allowing the flow go, but he's doing a good job here of recognizing that there was a natural tie-up, and he just tries to get on with the match really quick, doesn't look to give any minus points, and let's get going again. It was just more of a natural tie-up as opposed to anybody really grabbing. Yeah,
and again we can see a slightly different thing where he's gone JUKKA was kind of stepping into there, pushing into that. So there is a case of advantage almost from if there's no advantage, grand, carry on. If someone is getting an advantage from the situation, then maybe there needs to be a warning. But both of the lads are very, very happy to come to hands and do a little bit of trading here. And the scoreboard has been kind of showing that, it's been 2-2 for a bit, and I think it's quite a very close scoreboard the whole way here.
Yeah, and that's that nice side kick again from Jukka. He pulls the knee really deep in, and he's getting a good push. And then he's trying to look into the hands, and Magamet's trying to set up the defensive side kicks as well. But this is a very interesting sequence for me because it's what we mentioned earlier versus Italy, where Magamet is looking for the longer extra shot of the side kick, where
Yeah.
Jukka is getting the hands, and it's just, I think basically the side kick is just getting a bit of a better return from the referees as opposed to the hands. So they're both leading with the front leg.
Yeah.
Mago then is going to kicks again, where Yuka's looking to go to hands again. And then they're trying to mix that up and then break the play of that a little bit as well. I think, like we said this in the last clip as well last week, it's the person usually who gets the very first shot with the hand that is very clear gets the return. Because when they're both punching, there's no return there. So Magamet actually does a really good job of finding the first one most of the time.
Not sure why I left that clip in, but you're dead right. But I think there's a distinction as well here between the two, where you can see a little bit like the last one, where there is a case of, well, what's getting a return here, like what's working, what techniques are scoring, and maybe you need to make an adjustment in the middle of the match. It's like, okay, if my hands aren't scoring like the way I'd like to, can I actually change my game a little bit and try to draw a few more of the scores off the legs?
Yeah, we see the first bit of evasive movement here as well from Magomed, which he's actually really, really good at. But the good circling, and I think that allows him to maybe lure his opponent in a bit more then. So we always talk about pulling your opponent in. So this is a good example of it. He's trying to draw his opponent in, make them overcommit, and then he's trying to just sneak out the back door.
Very interesting one with this one, though, and you could, I think, present some real challenges because he's not a classically right or left-legged fighter. Like he's able to mix it up, so he often goes to the left leg to match Magomed, and that's not something that the others have done. And I think it does let him get to hands a little bit more effectively, maybe, than some of the other guys have done against him.
Yeah, that's important as well. I think that the fact that he's really squeezing the space here now, I think that Magamet is able to use that to his advantage as well, because he's very aware now of that there's a chase on, and he's able to almost play the cat and mouse game, which he's very good at. A nice fancy finish, and there we go, a bit of Mortal Kombat and all in there.
Yeah, why not? We'll have that.
Why not?
I mean,
3-1 win.
I have to say though, when you're watching that just as a casual, like, you're not invested in the fight, you're not watching the scoreboard per se, but only the flags. Many of the exchanges, you're kind of instinctively jumping to say, look, Yuka's winning that. Like it's, the legs are carrying in well, he's the first to hands. There was a lot of exchanges like that. And then you kind of go back and you watch it and you go, okay, well, the hands, he did go to hands first, but they didn't connect. And there was the side kick, on the way in. And, there's some of them where, the momentum went with Jukka, but not necessarily the contact. By the time he was actually getting into contact, it was only coming in one side. I think what you've got there is a difference between volume of scores that aren't as high value versus a few scores from Magamet that are very high value and very visible.
You got to understand the scoring system as well. That's important. It's not an actual fight at the end of the day where you're looking to impose your will. It's about getting the clear scores that the referees have to see very visible to click the button. If they don't, they can't. They're not rewarding people for, like in other combat sports, for like domination of the ring space and momentum and exactly overall dominance, really. But at the same time, he really controls it the way he needs to. And I think that the takeaway there is very similar to the point that you made. Is, for me, a little note I made there: are psychics more valuable in ITF scoring when you don't get that very first clear score on hands? If you don't get the very first score with the blitz or the jumping in with the front hand, then maybe is the question, is the side kick a bit more valuable? And I think that what we've seen so far here today, the answer maybe leans towards yes. And
and it's interesting because obviously to score the side kick, it has to hit the hip. Like, there's almost never going to be a side kick higher than the hip that scores. But what it does do is it tends to create that long line, which is a very, very clear A to B for the referees to see. There's no question that it's a good score. Whereas defensively, the side kick can be sometimes a little bit cut off and trapped. The leg doesn't get to extend. The space between the opponents isn't preserved, and that one can be harder to see. So I think
might land in the ring.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So I think the attacking side kick, if it lands, I think has a very, very clear value on the scoreboard. Whereas, you know, when it comes to hands, if you're the one that gets in first but it initiates a trade, sometimes you don't end up getting the full value of it. But we've seen in other rings and at other times, you know, if your punching is clear, if you're the one getting there, particularly those long singles from front or backhand, you know, those ones are rewarded very well on the scoreboard for sure.
Yeah, I think as well why Magamet actually gets a good return for him on his side kick is because of that lean we mentioned earlier. Because think about it, he makes more distance visible between him and the opponent in the gap between them for the side kick to happen.
Yeah.
Whereas if you stand really tall and your posture is really upright, then your side kick is actually going to appear more closer to that gap of your opponent. So that's just a little bit more of extension, I think, really helps the visibility of the score.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of funny how that leads into the semi-final, which was a very, very short match, but B, all about a very, very clear moving forward scoring side kick. So we'll have a quick look here.
Yeah. So I asked Magamet about this yesterday, and he confirmed that it was a broken rib. So it started off with just one shot, and this was actually lined up to be a cracker of a match. This Polish guy, new to the team from my perspective anyway, I haven't seen him before.
Yeah.
Started off his first couple of matches really well, but Magamet lands that side kick super strong. And I don't know if he had a prior injury or whatever, but apparently he cracked a rib there or broke a rib of some sort.
That can't have felt good.
So not nice, but good shot from Magamet.
Yeah, and just one of those things where, as you said, you look at the shot itself, it doesn't look like it's, how would you say, it doesn't look terrible. You know, there isn't that much knee retraction, but it's just a case of when the heel sinks into the ribs, and there is, you know,
right on the heel,
yeah. There's nothing you can do about it, and you know, and that's what that is. Like, that's just the heel is clocked into the rib there. There's a bit of forward momentum from it's not Marcin actually, that's Michał, you know, coming into it, and it's unlucky, but you know, that's made for a very, very quick semi-final. So Magomed's got to final, I suppose, after a bit of a break, really, compared to his opponent on the other side of it, and you know, he ends up with more Poland. So
more Poland again, and two of these guys are relatively new to the 78 division, so they did a good job to get 2 podiums from Poland's perspective. And this guy is actually kind of comes out with the style of Magamet, I think, of that moving around, pushing, pulling, testing, leaning back on the side kick. So it cues up to be an interesting match.
It really, really does. And like you know, for me, I'm looking at it and going, well, hang on a second. There's we have this right-left game again. You know, in terms of like, they are almost like mirrors of each other in terms of the stance and the approach with the side kick and so on. And classically, a lot of the Polish fighters have like preferred to spar in a more open stance and use the turning kick and the angles a little bit more. But they are transitioning back into, or not necessarily back into, but you're certainly seeing more guys who use that side fighting stance and the side kick more. But again, like you said, a very good angle from Magamet getting forward and outside of that front foot once again.
Yeah, he just launches there, and that's the nice headshot. But that's the, like, how even coming over with that, the angle you can pull on that is impressive. But I think that's very important to mention. That's what we talked about in the last clip against JUKKA, Finland. The fact that he was able to get the very first clear shot is the importance. So like, a lot of this is scrappy then after. So like, referees aren't going to be scoring this. So your objective here is to match your opponent at the very least with when it gets to hands. So if you're looking for the clear shot on the entry and the exit.
But again, we're looking at this side kick. So as the fighters change about, you know, Magamet is here. He's just got under that arm there with the side kick again, and like, so effective in finding that sweet spot or finding where that is.
Finds that hip so well.
Yeah. It looks casual, it looks lazy, but you know, it's so targeted.
Yeah, but I think that as well impacts the timing of the reads his opponents get on it. It's very rare that you see someone counter it like well. We've seen one clip from Italy at the very start, but that's probably it from the whole championships here of the 5 matches. Like, he's able to disguise it really well, and the timing that people can get on it seems difficult.
Absolutely. And I think what we've seen an awful lot in this one as well is just when he chooses to go to hands, it's just, again, it's picking that line, just being outside, and he's got a little bit clipped there, but picking that line outside the opponent's front foot and just making sure he gets value. So when it does get there, you know, again, really, really nice side kick, but he just gets outside that line and it's straight through from there. So it's good principles. It's what, you know, what's actually gone the distance for Magomed. I think in this one is that kind of that return to first principles and doing them very, very well. Picking a good line and a good target for the side kick and being consistent with it, and a good line for going to hands where you're in a nice position where your opponent can't really react to it.
Yeah, like apart from the last two, if the scoreboard wasn't visible and I was his coach, I would be absolutely screaming at him to avoid the corners.
Yeah.
But he's actually getting a great return from there. So that just shows as well that the way he's able to sneak that kick in and make it valuable for him.
Definitely. It was just like, as you're looking at the closing out of the match, it's a 2-1 match. You think it's relatively close. You know, and certainly in terms of the scores, but you may feel like, well, my two cards aren't going anywhere and you need more than this warning. And, you know, he is still putting side kicks on the hip, you know, as he goes. Now, the return on all of those, that's questionable because, you know, of course, if he doesn't finish it while he's still in the ring, you know, it's another story. But you know, clearly done plenty in terms of his scoring potential. Like, there's so many side kicks thrown. And, like, I'd always say when we're teaching kids, like, when you throw side kicks, you probably throw 5 or 6 for every one that lands. And, you know, and it can be more. But he's kind of hitting a return rate of maybe he's getting closer to, like, 30% of them landing, you know, or 25% of them landing. Like, it's just that little bit better. And that's massive over 4 minutes.
I think it's a patience game as well, is that maybe that's why Master Willie is hounding him to tell him to use the side kick more, because it can be very easy where you throw 1 or 2 side kicks to say, okay, maybe now I'm going to try something else to get the return. But when you do that 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, maybe 5, maybe 6, like, that patience actually takes a lot of discipline. But if you stick to it, there is a good chance, like you said, that you will get the return. So it's not easy to do in terms of, like, the decision making of it. But if you stick to your guns a lot of time and you have a decent side kick, you will get the return. But like, as I said, it's sometimes the discipline side of it is not easy, because you're more inclined to go, maybe I'll go to hands, maybe I'll try a different technique, you know. So the discipline side of it and just that patience is important, and we've seen that towards the end of this match too.
But even jump that up to the kind of the macro scale. Like, how often is it you come out of a match and you lose and you decide, okay, I'm going to change XYZ for the next time, rather than I'm going to do the same things again but just a little bit better. I'm going to concentrate more, I'm going to do whatever. Where very often it's like, well, okay, my side kick didn't work, I'll try using this instead. It's like, that's such a novice thing to do, or you know, a novice way to think. Whereas, you know, the reality is, it's not your side kick, it's specifically it's how you use it, when you use it, what you know, it's not that it was a side kick. That isn't what the problem is.
Not what you do, is the way that you do it.
Oh, nicely done. So what would you think in terms of, like, the talking points from Magomed's path to his final and eventually winning the European Championships at 78? What were the kind of the take homes, and where do we go from there?
Yeah, I think it's very important that you have a deep understanding of your strengths and your how you're going to impose your game on the opponent. I think that's a very important takeaway here that we see from Magomed. Having a good solid base of side kick is extremely important. We know that. But then how you use it in different situations. I think that you made the point in the first fight of how he's able to change the chambers, change the distance, change small subtle things. Even his standing foot coming under him a little deeper gives him a lot of balance that he can use with the side kick. So there's small little technical details there that he does very well. But I think that the big thing for me is the overall mental capacity of the being patient, knowing the scoreboard, not getting too excited, knowing the game state really well, and knowing when he needs to abort mission when he's, like, in the corner and it's time to maybe do something different, particularly on the restart. So when the referee says, Hecho, there's a warning, there's a break, whatever, he usually has a go-to plan that he's doing no matter what happens on the opponent's side, which is an important thing to take away as well.
Well, there's that certainty to it, and, you know, a big part of this is about managing the mental load, the chunking of it. So you know, if you can take the match and the game state and all the rest of it, and take these hundreds and thousands of variables and make it into a very simple, like, you know, A or B or C kind of thing, to where you can more quickly arrive at those decisions than your opponent, and more consistently arrive at those decisions. And, you know, as much as we saw flashes of what Magomed could do, as in we saw him, you know, pulling to the corners, x-raying under legs, we saw, you know, the odd blitz, we saw a retreating 360, we saw, you know, some change-ups that went to the head. Most of, 90% of what Magomed did was hit someone with that left leg, front leg side kick right on the hip, and manage the distance, manage the ring position. And then when the person you know, needed to kind of, you know, push a little bit harder and to be on top of his leg, he'd switch the hand, step outside, crack you with a backhand and go, all right, let's go again. So I think his management of the mental load on all that was, you know, was exceptional. And again, as you pointed out earlier, like his decision making under pressure and his absorption of the game state and turning that into a game plan was excellent.
Yeah, I think overall just the mature performance he had.
Yeah.
Like exactly what you said, but even when we mentioned earlier the patience he had as well, even with using the psychic a bit more, is like overall just the big takeaway for me is it was a very mature performance. He didn't get carried away with the fancy slick skills he can use. He did what needed to be done to get the result, and I think that's a very important takeaway. That a lot of time we see like very fancy techniques and fun things on Instagram, whatever, on highlight videos, and everybody wants to do them. But then you got to remember that the basics win, the fundamentals are very important. So a very mature performance, and that's why he's double champion, champ.
So well done, Mago. That's that is definitely where you want to put yourself at the end of the day. And you know, 78 kilo European champion, you know, bouncing back out of COVID and everything like that is a fantastic achievement. So Richie, do you want to add anything before we sign ourselves out for today?
No, that's it. I think I'll enjoy today's one. Some very good takeaways here, and I'm sure anybody who watched it this far will agree. Very, very important to be able to take important points away from the best in our sport. And that's the whole point of this series. So if there's someone else who you really admire and you want us to get a deep dive into their path to the Euros, into becoming European champion, let us know. Hopefully we can get one more in before the end of the year.
For sure.
And we'll see how that goes. So let us know how your thoughts are on this one. Put in some comments as well if some bits that we missed that you think makes Magamet the champion he is. And we'll catch you in the next one.
See you, folks.